Hey guys, or nobody, depends on depends on who listens to this. If you're new here, if whatever. If you're new here, I basically use this entire platform as just a thing for me to talk about the things I want to talk about because I feel like I can't talk about them in my life. I feel like there's nobody around me who wants to engage in these types of conversation just because of the state of the way things are. So, yeah, that's that. And today, I hope we have a great discussion because these things are off the cup. There's no rehearsal. There's no practice for this. It's just I go where my thoughts take me. So today, the topic that I want to talk about is something I'm very interested in. It's the skepticism. It's the topic of skepticism versus conspiratorial thinking. And I think this is a really relevant topic for a multitude of reasons. One, there's a lot of people who are skeptical at the moment with everything going on who are being labeled as conspiracy theorists, which is mainly the reason for me making me talking about this topic, because with my thoughts I would be labeled as a conspiracy theorist, and I am not a conspiracy theorist. I am a skeptic, and there's nothing wrong with that. Okay. So anyways, let's get started. So let's start with conspiracy theorists. What is a conspiracy theorist? What is someone who believes in a conspiracy? Well, there are many things that a conspiracy theorist... There are many ways to describe what a conspiracy theorist can be. I think the best way to describe a conspiracy theorist would be something along the lines of somebody who believes that there is a grand plot that is orchestrating everything, and typically it has a malicious intent, and it uses the main mechanism by which it functions is deception. And someone might have completely different degrees to which they believe the conspiracy goes to, right? They may believe, oh, this goes all the way up to the top, or they might believe that it's just the top and not anybody else at the bottom. It depends. It depends on the conspiracy you believe, I suppose. And I think it'd be helpful to talk about an example of what a conspiracy theory might be. So I think the perfect example of this would be the flat earth theory and what people would call flat earthers, which I don't like labeling people like that. I just, someone who believes that the earth is flat, let's say. Some of them are arrogant and maybe they deserve the negative connotation, but they won't receive it from me. So the flat earth theory. Okay. So what is this thing? What is the flat earth theory exactly? So the flat earth theory, I'm sure, you've heard of it. It's essentially people who believe that the earth is actually flat. That is not a spherical ball. That is not a planet that is in the universe. And the thing with this type of belief is that I don't know much about the flat Earth theory. I know they believe the Earth is flat, and I know that they believe it's a plane. I think they believe it's constantly moving upwards as to mimic gravity. I think they also believe that there is an ice shelf all around the landmass, or all around the disk, let's say, that's keeping us from falling off the edge or something like that. And they may believe that space isn't real. They may believe that the sun is not as far away or as big as it's led to believe. All things of this nature. And to me, the thing with the flat Earth theory, and this is the thing with conspiracy theories, and I think this is what really delineates them. It's the type of thing that if you poke at a bit, it falls apart, right? If you just put it under a little bit of stress, the entire paradigm comes undone. So what I mean by this, and the perfect example is, so with the flat earth theory, in order for you to believe this, you have to have a suspension of disbelief of the highest magnitude, and you have to believe thoroughly that the number of people who are deceiving the world is unimaginable. The number of people who are acting agents of this deception. And the logic I'd like to use here, just to point this out, would be something along the lines of, imagine a university student. Imagine a high school kid who wants to study physics, goes to university in a physics program, finishes his physics program, goes on to do a master's degree in physics, finishes the master's program, and goes on to do a PhD. And let's say he specialized in astrophysics, right? Where he studies the galaxy, he studies the cosmos, he studies stars, he studies black holes, he studies space, energy, and things along those lines. And he uses a very specific set of equations that were derived from observing reality very closely. They were derived from looking at reality, poking in the right places, writing down what we observed, and then coming to a conclusion. That's how they were derived. And we use those equations every single day when we're building anything, when we're manufacturing anything. Electrical engineers, mechanical engineers, civil engineers, chemical engineers, electricians. We use these equations every single day, and they work. And the fact that they work reinforces their existence and reinforces the scientific narrative. Okay, so that's problem number one, right? All these equations that were derived from the system that we are describing as the actual system work, which reinforces the system. All right, that's a huge problem for people who believe in the flat earth theory, because they have to completely rewrite the entire rules of physics, which is number one. But, they're willing to do it. But I think number two, which is the biggest thing, is, again, the magnitude of the deception is so large, it's so incomprehensible, and it's so absurd. So again, with that physics student, he graduated, he's got his PhD in physics, and now he's studying space. He's studying astrophysics. So at what point in this person's education is the secret president of the world going to come see him and say, hey, by the way, space is fake. By the way, everything is a hoax. And now that, you have access to telescopes and to technology that can study space, it's good to tell you that's all phony. That's all phony. And right now, the only thing you have to worry about is projecting this message. And we're going to pay you a fuck ton of money if you do it. Right? Is that what you think happens? Is that what you think genuinely happens? That at a certain point, the veil is just lifted? Well, let me tell you, how many people do you think are going to study any sort of field, and they're going into the higher sections of that field, and they're really, the higher concepts, and they need to really look at reality the way it's been laid out for us, right? How many of those people exist in this world? Millions of university students every single year. So every single one of these people have to be lying. For the flat earth theory to work, all of these people have to be lying. Anybody who relies on any sort of physical experiment or physical law is lying. That's the deception that we're talking about. That's the scale of the deception. And that is logically impossible. It is not possible for that to be true. I'm sorry. It's possible, but the probability of it is so infinitesimally small that it's negligible. And we don't need to talk about it. We don't need to consider it because it's ridiculous. And to me, that's the mark of a conspiracy theory. The mark of a conspiracy theory is that if it's just pushed a bit, it falls over. And that all the stars need to align with all the galaxies, with all the universes, with all the continuums. They all have to align for the conspiracy to actually take place. That's the mark of a conspiracy. The mark of skepticism is quite different. Skepticism is quite healthy, in fact. And to me, skepticism is probably the fundamental nature of the West as we know it, the modern West. Well, not the modern West, but the modern West, let's say. Not the postmodern West. Because if we look at skepticism, what is skepticism? Skepticism is looking at something that is presented and saying, I don't know about that. That looks pretty interesting, but I'm not going to believe it, and I'm not going to not believe it. I'm going to put it in this Schrodinger's box where it's going to stay suspended in the state of could be, could not be, until I have more proof, until I have more information that could assert that as a fact. That's skepticism. And skepticism is maybe one of the most important things about humans, about our society, about the West. Skepticism is by far one of the most important things about the West. And here's the funniest way to prove that. Look at Nicholas Copernicus. He was skeptical about the church's teachings that that the sun revolved around the earth. He was skeptical about that. Despite what everyone was saying and all the pressures that were saying, don't do this, don't talk about this, don't even think this, he thought it. And he looked into it because he wasn't sure. He had to figure out for himself. And that's fine. That's fine. He was imprisoned for it, but that's fine because he revolutionized the way that we look at things. And this was one of the most important parts of the Great Revolution, right? The revolution of ideas. This was one of the most integral parts, that Copernicus was skeptical about what was told to him. And you know what that did? That created a cascading series of skeptical thoughts. Hey, if he was right about that and they were wrong about that, then what else are they wrong about? Right? That's what ended up happening. And everybody, well, not everybody, but people just began questioning everything. And my goodness, was it an explosion. And it was an explosion of ideas. It was a revolution in every sense of the word. It lifted us from the Dark Ages into a completely new mode of being. And it was all brought on by the fact that we were skeptical. You see, skepticism, to me, is the appropriate way of being. Because what does it mean to be skeptical? Well, to be skeptical just means you won't accept things at face value. And why would you accept anything at face value? Why would you do that? That doesn't seem very logical. It doesn't seem very reasonable. Skepticism is what allowed for everything that we have today. Skepticism is at the very heart of our Western democracy, of our modern civilization. Skepticism is potentially the mechanism by which this is all possible. And it brings me great pain to see that skepticism is under attack. Skepticism is being assaulted upon. If you're a skeptic today, you're not a skeptic, you're a conspiracy theorist. If you're a free thinker and you think things that you want to think, you're actually not a thinker. You're a conspiracy theorist. See, and that's the problem I have today. There's a very big difference between conspiracy theorists and people who are skeptical. And I think we need to embrace a bit more skepticism. Or we need to allow people to be more skeptical. We need to not villainize people who openly are skeptical about ideas. And to be skeptical doesn't necessarily mean you're saying the other person is wrong. It just means that you're saying they could be wrong, but they could also be right. It's saying, hey, maybe in your experience, you have reason to believe that this is the case. But in my experience, I don't have that reason to believe that that's the case, other than you telling me that it's the case. And I'm sorry, but I cannot simply accept that. I will have to do my own investigation. I have questions that need to be answered in order for me to accept this mode of thinking. But we can't do that because the act of questioning is what is being rained down on. The act of simply raising your hand in class and saying, well, that's cool, but there's also like other things. That the fact that you do that is and you get punished. You get punished today for doing that. And people notice, and people know that you get punished because nobody stands up and says anything. When you're sitting in a room full of people and the topic goes on to something that you very much disagree with, you don't say anything. You don't say anything because you can't. Because you know that if you were to say something, it is essentially paramount to heresy. And we've essentially entered this system where it is okay for people to bully other people who have not even different opinions, who just have questions. Obviously, there are people with different opinions. But The problem is not the people with different opinions. The problem is the people with questions. Because if you cut out people with questions out of the equation, the people with questions get confused. Well, why can't I even ask this question? What's that? What's that about? And that's where the problems arise. Because where do those people go? What do you do if you think you identify with one group and then you realize that there's an inconsistency in the way that you feel and the way that they feel, so you bring it up and they basically tell you you're stupid for bringing it up? What do you do in that situation? Where do you go? See, and I think that's the problem here. We're dealing with the disappearance of the middle ground. Or at least we're dealing with the disappearance of the representation of the middle ground. All we're seeing is the representation from the far end of one side and the far end of the other. And the problem right now is the one side that has pretty much captured all of our major institutions and has seeped their ideological mechanisms through the very fiber of all those institutions. That side is in control, and that side is deciding that people who do not side with them, even the people who do not side with them, are heretics, are the other, are the opponents, are the people we have to punish, people we have to put on a blacklist, simply because they don't agree with us and they don't accept everything we've said at face value. That's wrong. That's wrong. Listen, I'll agree with you if you could logically explain your point. I'll agree with you if you could logically dismantle my point that is preventing me from agreeing with you. I will. I will. But I will not sit here and accept this laying down. Because I've had enough. I've had enough of not being able to think out loud. I've had enough of having to sit through hours and hours of this type of nonsense. This is a new religion. You want to talk about a conspiracy theory? A conspiracy theory is somebody thinking that everybody else who doesn't think like they do is against them. That is conspiratorial thinking. So the next time you say conspiracy theorist, you're a conspiracy theorist, the next time you say that, just think real hard about what that word means. And then think about yourself. Maybe you'll see a resemblance. All right. That's everything. I'm getting worked up. All right. Well, thanks for tuning in. Have a great day.